Good morning, everybody. I had to make an impromptu trip. I'm on the road. I planned my life so that I would be somewhere where there is internet at 10 a.m., but I tried out this internet where I am last night with a group of family, and I kept getting booted off. So, knowing that I don't have strong internet service here, instead, I am going to be creating a short um, lecture about boards that, when taken together with your readings, should enable you to do a short exercise that will be on the discussion board. And so I am asking that everybody watch this. Head on over to the discussion board. It will say Nonprofit Boards Discussion Board. Just use the discussion link in the Canvas course, and there will be instructions for what to do over there. Here, I just want to talk a little bit about boards and the separation and duties and roles of boards from the staff and how those things differ. Okay, let's just go. Okay, so the board's view is supposed to be from the balcony. That picture, I don't know if it's hard for you to see, but is from someone high up looking down over a performance. You can see the crowds in the seats and the people on the stage. You could think of the people on the stage being the staff of an organization and the people in the audience as being the clients or beneficiaries who are served. The board is at a completely different level in terms of its perspective. And although boards and staffs do and should interact in different times in different ways, everybody should be at the holiday fundraiser. In fact, the board should be very involved in that, in fundraising. The board members sometimes are required to do a stint as a volunteer inside so that they have a better understanding of the day to day and all that kind of stuff. In terms of decision making and authority, the board should be a little bit removed from the organization so that they can have kind of an objective point of view, and it's that objectivity that they bring to their tasks. All right, now the first thing I want to say, because I reviewed the comments that I saw in the readings this week, and I noticed that some of you referred to the board members as being hired. Board members for nonprofit organizations are all volunteers. They are just as much volunteers as the people. For example, in St. Vincent de Paul, you have a volunteer board of directors, and you have volunteers who show up, every night to help serve dinner to the guests of St. Vincent de Paul. Those people are all equally volunteers and equally valuable. They just have different jobs. So for those of you who thought the board members are an employed position, a paid position, they are not. They sometimes are in a for-profit organization, but not in a nonprofit. Okay, so why is it that the board's view has to be removed? It's so that they can make sort of umbrella decisions under which other things happen. We've talked a little bit about the mission and the vision. A board's job is to make sure, well, actually to create the mission and the vision in the first instance, and to make sure that everything that the organization does is aligned with that mission and vision. The board needs to make all kinds of policy decisions, and that is everything from policy decisions about what kind uh, of grants the organization will take, down to uh, employee employee policy manuals, those kinds of decisions. All kinds of policy decisions, in other words, sets of rules by which the organization will live, should be passed by the board. The board has a fiduciary duty. If you're not sure what that word looks like, what that means, after reading and you still aren't sure, you might want to actually look it up. But in short, a fiduciary duty is a duty to take care of something, and usually there are standards of care. And the fiduciary duty, I believe, that applies to a board is that you need to take care of the board's money and resources the same way you would ostensibly take care of your own resources. In other words, with great care. Those are not legal terms that I'm using. I'm just trying to sum it up. Okay, the board also needs to hire, support, and supervise the executive director. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute. But somebody's got to hire that executive director, right? Even though the board are volunteers, and even though, in a way, the executive director has to manage and facilitate the board's work, the board is her boss or his boss, as the case may be. And then finally, the board acts as ambassadors to outside stakeholders, and that can work in a lot of ways. They can simply talk up the organization when the opportunity arises. They might represent the organization at a conference or in a group of stakeholders. They might raise money for the organization. And it's important that they be ambassadors because as board members, the rest of the community is going to look to them to have the most insider information about the organization and how well it's doing, both in terms of its programs and its financial well-being. And they're going to look to those board members to kind of validate the work of the organization. And if there is a problem that comes up in the organization, which from time to time happens, a problem will happen, whether something like I mentioned that I worked for an organization that had been embezzled, whether something horrible like that, or something less like an organization lost a source of funding, and the outside world's going to want to know how stable is this organization given the bumps that it is experiencing, and they will look to board members to be able to educate and share information that is important for partners to have. Okay, so before I leave this slide, I think that this is really, I mean, I can't say that there aren't other duties for the board, but basically these are the overarching umbrellas under which the board's decisions have to be put into place by the staff. All right, so I want to talk specifically about just one of these, and that is the board's job to hire, support, and supervise the executive director. And I want to kind of illustrate this conversation with this slide, which unfortunately I can see that I gotta move her staff a little bit because I'm in the way. But I don't want to get them confused with the board, so we'll just reduce the size of her staff here. This is funny. Yeah, no, I don't know if this is gonna work. All right. This is just weird. Okay, fine. You'll just have to know that that said the relationship of the executive to the staff. All right. Let's see what I can do. There we go. All right. Creating in front of you. Okay, so this is what is very important. Let's assume that this woman in the middle is the executive director of an organization and that this group of professional-ish looking people are her board members. And that this group over here of all these people working, this is her staff. This board over here hires her. So when they need an executive director, they basically, however they go about advertising, recruiting for that executive director, they handle that just the way that anybody who handles an employee would do it. They get resumes, they look through the resumes, they narrow it down to some really good candidates, hopefully. They begin doing interviews, they share what they are hoping for the organization with the interviewees. The interviewees share a little bit about their skills, and hopefully if you are going to be interviewing for any job, they have done some amount of looking into the organization before they get to the interview and read up on them. And kind of can address any questions that come up about how they would, how they would approach fundraising, or what's their theory of management or their philosophy of management, what kind of a culture would they like to cultivate, and talk about the culture that's already there and whether that's a good fit and they're comfortable, and so on and so forth. And these are the kinds of questions and so forth that a board would go through, those kinds of processes to hire. Once they have hired, though, the executive, that's it. They are hands off on hiring. It is the executive's role to hire all of this staff right here. And of course, if this executive comes into an existing organization, there's already going to be some staff. And sometimes after a new exec comes in, she will find that one of these or more people and she do not click, and it is her prerogative to let go of someone. She has to use her judgment. If they're really doing a good job, she might try to work out the personality issues. If they're not doing a good job, no matter how much she likes them, she might let them go. But anyway, that's her responsibility and her job. And the board does not get to have a say in that. And that is a point that I want to make clear. The board oversees the executive, but they do not oversee or interact regularly with any staff people. Now, there may be some exceptions. A board member may take on a project to help the organization, and might be that one or two staff people are also involved in this project, and so the board member and the staff would interact around the project. But the board member nevertheless does not have any ability to hire or fire, or to even influence the hiring or the firing of these employees. So one might ask, can the staff go around the executive to the board if they don't like the executive? And the answer to that is mostly no. It's very, very rare when an organization would have policies that enabled the executives to go around, the employees to go around the executive. And the reason for that is if employees thought every time they didn't like the executive they could go around her and appeal to one or more of the board members, her authority would become worthless, because it would just be like a kid who can't get what they want from dad, so they run and ask mom, or the other way around. Anyway, so that doesn't usually happen. The exceptions to that rule have to do with when someone feels sexually harassed or discriminated. The federal rules on discrimination allow someone who is uncomfortable to report it to anyone who is a supervisor. So let's take this woman right here with a little bun in her hair and the purple jacket sitting at this table. I hope you can see it. We see my cursor wrecking my slide. Anyway, let's say that this woman on top of her is her supervisor, and she feels like her supervisor is harassing her or is discriminating against her, maybe for the way she wears her hair. I don't know, whatever. She is allowed to report to any other supervisor, whether it's this person in this corner up here who supervises other people, not her, or whether she goes directly to the executive. If an employee feels like the executive is part of the harassment of whatever sort it is, then it is perfectly okay for that employee to go around that executive and go straight to the board. That is the only time when we are talking about discrimination or harassment claims. Otherwise, this person right here, the executive, handles all problems from the staff and all hiring and firing. And that is what I want you to know. What else does the board do with relationship to the executive? Well, the board has a lot of roles, and we're going to talk about those roles on Wednesday. Those roles are designed to help the whole organization, and particularly to be partners and supportive of the executive. And we will talk more about that. I will show you some actual documents on Wednesday from some real organizations. And on Wednesday, we'll start talking about that in relationship to how do you choose your board members for your board, because they don't just show up. You and the other board members, you if you're the executives, and the other board members, when there are other board members already, decide how board members can fill in for the needs of the organization that are not filled in terms of what your staff can already do and not do, and how in fact you go about figuring that out. So we will do that on Wednesday. In the meantime, this is the end of it. The two things that I want you to know are this is the group of activities that fall under the board's role, and that the relationship between the board and the staff goes directly through the executive and not around it in either direction. And that's it. And I will now encourage you to go over to Canvas. If you're not already in Canvas, you probably are if you're watching this, and find the discussions link and scroll until you see the board that's the discussion board that says nonprofit board discussion. And see you there.